at some point, in almost all cases, your child will reach the age of majority in your state. What we don't want to have happen to you is for you to be unprepared on the impact that that may have on your child's special education rights.
So Julie, here's how you have to think about it. And again, another tricky area of special ed law where you have to look at your state law. But what the age of majority means really is that in your state, the student has reached the age where they are competent legally to make their own decisions, both with regard to their education and otherwise. That's what the age of majority is. And it varies by state to state. In most states it's 18, but it can be different in your state. Here's the thing. Up until the student reaching the age of majority, the parents under the IDEA hold their children's rights for them, their special education rights for them. So as an example, if you have a fourth grader whose rights are being violated under the IDEA, that fourth grader isn't going to go hire a lawyer and sue the school district. It's the parent who enforces that child's rights, okay? They hold those rights for them. Parents have their own rights under the IDEA as well, but in terms of the student's rights, they're held by the parent until the transfer of rights happens, okay? And the transfer of rights, which is defined by the IDEA, really just means that that has happened, that the student's rights are now transferred from the parent to the student. It doesn't happen for all students for a lot of reasons. There are some students who, by nature of their disability, they will never be legally competent. And the reason that the IDEA requires that 1 year prior to the student reaching the age of majority, which usually will trigger the transfer of rights, that what happens is that that student has to be provided information about the fact that it's going to happen. In a year, your rights are going to become yours. Your parents now go to the IEP meetings and act on your behalf, sometimes with you and sometimes without you. Your parents sign consent for evaluations. Your parents sign consent for services. In a year, it's going to be your rights, and you're going to have to do all of these things. And the reason we want that to happen, Julie, is we want parents and students to be prepared.
Well, and in theory, that sounds like a really good idea.
Right.
I think in my experience,
Doesn't happen.
I can't really ever remember it happening.
Yeah.
And I am usually the one who says, we're going to discuss this now. Let's talk about the age of majority and the transfer of rights, and talk about the fact that in one student's case, it might mean that the rights aren't going to transfer because the child won't be competent.
Right.
Or perhaps understanding that the child's rights will transfer and how that's going to impact things. But sadly, Jen, in most cases, it doesn't really come up. Now, that could be just my experience. I'm hoping not.
It's mine too. And what I've often say when I'm at an IEP team meeting for a student who's 17 and a half or 18 is, has anyone sat the student down? When did that happen? And you kind of get a lot of looks at each other like, oh, I don't know if that ever happened, right? Here's the reason it's so important and why we want you to be aware of why it should happen is that you can secure, through various channels, legal decision-making authority on your child's education past them reaching the age of majority, but you have to go through certain steps. So if it's the case that your child doesn't have the ability to be legally competent, then there are procedures you can go through various courts, probate courts, and various other kinds of procedures where you're having a judge order that your child does not have the ability to be legally competent and then appoint you as the person who can make their decisions for them. It may be that your child isn't necessarily incompetent legally, but they've elected to make you their educational decision maker for a lot of reasons. A lot of 18-year-old students feel that way. Then you may want to get a power of attorney that your child signs when they reach 18 or whatever the age of majority is in your state that assigns you the right to make educational decisions or certain decisions for them. So you can't do all of these things if you're finding out at the IEP team when your child has already passed that transfer of rights. And I've had this happen in real life where it can be really problematic.
So have I.
Yeah.
What's your example?
Well, it's a really horrible example, I hate talking about it because it still gets me so upset, but I had a situation with a student prior to my involvement who was, again, transfer of rights had occurred. Nobody had sat the student down to explain what the implications of that were legally. The student had a disability where she wanted to go to college and had every reason to expect that she should go to college, but needed another year or two of transition services between that traditional senior year of high school and that next step. Well, the family goes to the IEP meeting and the director wants to get the student's services to be over. They want to exit the student and issue the diploma. And the parents are not in agreement and had discussed it with the student who also wanted to continue to get the services. Well, what happened was that, and this was a student who had some significant deficits. And so the administrator unfortunately said to the student, well, I thought you wanted to go to college, don't you? And the student said, yes, I want to go to college. And the administrator said, well, you can't go to college unless you get your diploma. So you have to sign this paper that says that you're being exited from services. And because the parents had not secured any educational decision making, it was the student who was put in that place and wasn't aware that she was being taken advantage of. And unfortunately, the genie was then out of the bottle. And while I was able to rectify the situation later because it was pretty egregious, had that family not sought out the services of an attorney, that student would have lost a couple of years of service to which she was legally entitled.
And we certainly don't want to make the impression that every school district is going to try to, pull the wool over your eyes.
Horrible example. Yeah.
But you do need to be aware that those type of situations do exist, and that's why we want you to be aware of this age of majority and transfer of rights.